Hi everyone, welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to play chess. So let's start. First, let's talk about chess. Chess is a battle between two armies. One player has the white pieces. You see, these are the white pieces over here, all of these pieces, and all of this army is white, and the other player has black. So this is black's army. Each army has two rooks, two knights, two bishops, one queen, and one king. The ultimate aim of chess is to trap the opponent's king and checkmate him, or if you have an advantage like material. We'll talk about that in the next video or later in this video. So, mostly the target is to make your opponent checkmated, his king checkmated, and we'll talk about how to do that too. And if if the opponent is in a lost position or you are in a lost position, you have a opportunity of resigning. Instead of resigning just means giving up, so you can do that by tipping over your king in real chess, and in online chess you just press the resign button. Okay, so now let's start. Starting positions. Chess is played with eight columns, so eight columns and eight rows. The columns are called as ranks. No, wait. So columns are called as files, like this one. This is called the G file, and this is the B file. So that's like that. So it starts from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. We'll talk about that in chess notation. Okay, so let's start. How the board works. Wait a second. So these are called ranks. Rows are called ranks, and files are called, columns are called files. Okay, how the board works. There are two divisions, the queen side and the king side. So this whole part around here is the king side, and this whole part is the queen side. So, and this is just the barrier between the two sides. Okay, controlling the center. Controlling the center is one of the most important thing in a chess game, because the center is the strongest place in a chess game. You should always try to develop your army to the center. Okay, so this is the center. We'll talk more about it later. How pieces move. First, let's start with the rook. Let me just do it with the rook. Okay, here's a rook. So how does the rook move? Rooks move in straight lines. It can be this side, this side, this side, or this side. It can be any side. That's how they move. And up and down. So they can move up and down all the way here. So the squares that I highlighted in red, they can move to all these squares, side to side and up and down. They have a choice to move as many squares as they want in a straight line. So they have a choice from this line or this line, here. So let's just say if the rook moves here, now he has a new set of straight lines. So this is his new set. He has so much control over this file and less control here and some control on this file. So obviously the center gives more space for the rook. Let's just say a rook is here. So now he has only this much. But if he was in the center, now he controls four squares. That's why the center is important. Okay, capturing. Rooks can never jump over other pieces like the knight. And so if enemy piece is in the way, let's just say a pawn is here, the rooks must stop, capture, or wait till the piece has moved. So let's just say the rook is here and this pawn is here. It cannot go cross this. It cannot do that. So it can only capture this pawn because you see these dots, right? And this is how far it can move. If it goes to e8, that's illegal because that's not allowed in chess. So it either has to stop or just wait here, capture, or wait until the piece moves out of the way. So obviously the piece won't move, it'll just protect itself with other army pieces. So now let's talk about where rooks are best. Rooks are best on files and ranks, so if they're stuck here, that's not very good for them because they only control two diagonals here. But if they were on the C file or the F file, then they would have more power because now they control four diagonals, but this diagonal is still less. So that's why center is the most useful place for pieces. Okay, now let's talk about the bishop. How does the bishop move? Bishops move diagonally, so like from A, B, C, D, and so this bishop is on the E file and F, G, H. So they move all this diagonal over here, and also this diagonal. This is in the center, so there are many squares the bishop can move to, and the bishop cannot go like this because this is a dark squared bishop. The bishops always stay in their lines. So let's just say it's here. Now it has only one diagonal, which isn't very good, but that's also still fine. This is also good because now it controls all the diagonals, even though its power is limited to one square on these three diagonals. Okay, a bishop. So a bishop can move forward and backward here and then go here. So it can move as many squares that it wants as long as it stays in this dark square diagonal. So it's always better to keep two bishops because just imagine all the squares they control. So this light squared bishop controls so many squares, and so does the dark squared bishop. You can see that these two bishops working together cover a lot more squares than one bishop. So if you see now, it controls less. So always try to have two bishops, but in some cases you may have to trade them. Capturing pieces. Bishops can jump over other pieces, so just like the rook. If another piece is in the bishop's way, again it should stop, capture, or wait until the bishop or the opponent's piece has moved. So let's just say a rook is here and a pawn is here. So you have to, which would you take? A rook is more valuable than a pawn. So obviously you would want to take the rook. And the bishops can capture anything on the diagonals they move to. So if the bishop was here, it can capture this pawn. So that's how the bishop moves. Now let's talk about the queen. The queen moves like a bishop and a rook. So all this diagonal, all this diagonal. Wait, that was the wrong arrow. So just like the bishop and like the rook, it has so much power. It's the strongest piece on the chessboard. The queen is extremely powerful and is strong as a bishop and a rook combined. So as you can see, it can move to many squares. How does the queen move? We just talked about that now. So let's talk about capturing pieces. The queen cannot jump over other pieces like the knight. So if an enemy piece is in the way, the queen must stop, capture, or wait until the piece has moved. So let's just say a bishop is here and a rook is here. The rook is again more valuable than a bishop, so you would want to capture the bishop. I mean the rook. So let's just say if it was black's turn. Now he has two ways of capturing the queen, with the bishop or the rook. So you can take with the bishop, I mean the rook or the bishop. So he can do anything, and remember, we'll talk about this in later of the video or in the next video. So let's come back here. You should always try not to open up your queen too early. Remember that your queen is the most powerful piece and on the board, so try not to develop your queen too quickly because it will be chased by other enemy pieces because the queen is stronger than all the enemy pieces. It can be chased around. So let's just say a normal game, and this happens. So now you're doing something, and the queen just gets chased around. And obviously, black is better. If the queen moves here, you play d3, and the queen is almost trapped, and black is way better because he's got four pieces on the board, and white has only two. And the queen is obviously going to get chased around after some time. So remember that you shouldn't chase your queen so much. So let's just say instead of this, black can also just go for this. So you're attacking the queen, and now there's only one way. That's here because you have to trade. And if you don't, you lose the knight. So we'll talk about that later for the scholar's mate. And now let's move on to the rook. I mean, not the rook, the pawn. Actually, let's start with the knight because I like knights. Okay, so a knight's in the center. It cannot move to many squares. The knight is the only piece allowed to jump over other pieces. It jumps in a L shape or two squares in one direction and then one square to the side. So, two squares in one direction, one square to the side. This is how the knight moves. So, let's just see it in action. Two squares, and then here, one square to the side, two squares, and one direction to the side. So, it can move to 8 squares if it is in the center. So, as you can see, these are the knight's moving squares. It can move to these 8 squares over here. So if it goes here, now its squares are limited. Now it has only 4 squares. No, six actually. So now the knight has 6 squares, and if it was here, it's even worse. Now it has only 2 squares. So knights love the center and always try. If you want to unlock a knight's potential, then try always to put it in the center. Now let's talk about capturing. Okay, because he can jump over other pieces, let's just say a pawn is here and another pawn is here. The knight doesn't care if another piece is there, it just goes. Same with the white pieces. So let's just say there were these many pieces here. So now so now this queen is blocking one of the squares, but the knight can just jump over the rook. And it can also just jump over the bishop, and it's fine. So try not to do this to knights. Remember, your knights have special powers of jumping over other pieces and loves when placed in center or opponent side of the board. So let's see it in action. There's a knight here. Let's just say a king and a white king. And there's a knight here. So this knight is amazing. Wait a second. Okay, so this knight is amazing here because nothing can stop it. As you can see, this knight cannot. No, nobody can do anything to this knight because if the king moves, the knight is still going to stay there. So that's how the knight is good in opponent's positions. And see, every square it controls is almost in the opponent's position. It only controls two squares in white's territory. So this knight is doing amazing and it will prevent other pawns. So let's move on. Now let's talk about the pawn. Okay, so the pawn is called the soul of chess because the moves it makes depends on the other pieces. So let's just say there are pawns here and a bishop is stuck here. So if this pawn makes one move, the bishop is free. So that's why they are called the soul of chess. So because the moves they make are the most important. And remember, every pawn you move, they leave a weakness behind. So if you move this to h3, now this is weak. And if you move this, now these squares are weak. So, and if you just put a set of pawns here, the whole dark squares is weak. So these whole squares are weak except this one. Okay. So how does the pawn move? Pawns move one step up. So they just move like this. They can just move one step up, and one step up. So, and the pawns are placed on the second rank. They can never go to the first rank, and they can never move backward. So, capturing. And wait a second. So, before we go to capturing, there's a special thing that pawns can do over here. So, let's just say, okay, so white to move, and now it has an option of going two steps forward or one step forward. So, the pawn has an option of going two steps or one step forward. It's his choice. He can move one step or two steps. But after example, it moved two steps. Let's just say it moved two steps. It can only move one step after that. Capturing. Unlike other pieces, the pawn does not capture in the same way it moves. So let's just say a bunch of pawns are here. And white has to capture so white has to capture any side. So let's just say he captures this side. He has to capture all the way till here. So now he has two options. He can capture this side or this side. And after he captures queening of a pawn. If a pawn reaches to the 8th rank, then it can become a queen, a knight, a rook, or a bishop. It has chances of becoming any one of those. This is something magical that only pawns can do. So if a black pawn was here and it reaches to the 8th rank after some moves, black can create become a the pawn can become a bishop, a knight, a rook, or a queen. So it's the pawn's choice. It can become anything. When you promote to a queen, this is called promotion. So mostly because the queen is the most valuable piece, most players promote it to a queen. If players wish to promote to a bishop, knight, or a rook, this is called under promotion. So if a pawn reaches here and promotes to a knight, let's just say, in some places you may need it to become a knight. So let's say a pawn is here and a king is here. So this is black to move, and he's winning here. So first he can just promote it to a knight. He has a chance of promoting it to a queen, but obviously the queen just checks and it's better for white. So after the queen promotes the pawn promotes to a knight, it's attacking the king and the queen. We'll talk about the king after the pawn, and after the king moves, it can take, because the king has to move or it's impossible for, or the white army will lose, because the king is the most important piece on the board. So now let's talk about the king. The king is the most important piece in a chess game. So let's just set it up and put a king here. Because the object of the game is checkmate, this means you should try to protect your king from any other attacks or threats. So you should protect your king at all threats, and also attack the king at the same time. So you're protecting your king and attacking the other king at the same time. How does the king move? Although the king is the most important piece, He moves very slowly and he can only move one square in any direction, forward, backward, sides, or diagonal. So he can move any square in one direction. These are all the directions he can move to, just like the knight. It's only 8 squares. Capturing. The king captures pieces the same way he moves. He can capture, so if he moves here, let's just say a pawn is here, he can capture this. And remember that there's only one move per side, so the queen can, I mean, the pawn can just go. So let's just say the king is here, so the king has to catch the pawn before it promotes. And obviously, the king wins and the pawn is stuck. So that's how the king moves and captures. Check and checkmate. When the king is attacked by an opponent piece, we say he is in check. So if a rook is attacking this king, the king should move, capture, or wait. So I mean, another piece of your army should block the check, or he can capture. He cannot capture here because the king can only move to these squares. So here he has to move. Let's say a bishop was here. And now the bishop can just block this check, and now the king is safe. Okay, so the king can never stay or move on the square. So if he was here, he can never move on this rank unless he's unless the rook moves to another place. So if it goes here, now the king can move. Again, if it goes here, the king can move. But after here, this rank is not possible for the king to move. He has to move out of this rank, and this rank is protected by the rook. And if the king comes, he gets captured, which is not legal. So let's do the three rules of check. Capture the checking piece. If the king was here, if a piece has checked your king and you can capture it, look for danger, and if there is no danger, capture it. So here there is no danger in capturing this rook, and the king can happily capture this rook. Block the check. Put if you cannot capture it, again if the rook was here, or let's just say a queen was here. Now you can just slide your rook over here, and now the check is blocked. And now black has no more checks, because if he goes here, he gets captured here. Anywhere, black cannot check the king anymore for one move. Move your king out of check. So if there is a check here, you can move him to these squares. So these are the possible squares the king can move to. It's only 6, but obviously when you come here, you'll have the king's 8 squares back. So let's just say he moves here. He still has 6. So where is the best spot for the king? There is no best spot because he still has only 6 squares anywhere he moves, 6 or 7. And remember that this is a famous saying, check if you need to, check if you have to, but never check because you can. If you check because you can, this means that check if you have to get out of danger or draw the game or will get you an advantage. But if you check because you can do it, this may help the opponent. This may help the opponent because the person who the and now he just because the queen can check doesn't mean that it's a good check. Here a rook is here, so it can just capture the queen. So remember that check if you have to, and check if you need to, but don't check because you can, because that might help your opponent. Safety of your king. Because the king moves slowly, he is not very powerful. The king mostly relies on his army to protect him from attacks. Checkmate. If you cannot escape from check using any of these three rules mentioned in the three rules of check, then this is called checkmate. Now rook here. So now this is winning for black because black just checkmated him. The queen prevents all the squares and the king is stuck in the corner and he has nowhere to move. If he moves here, done. So that's how the king moves. One of them is castling and en passant. So let's talk about them now. In chess, you must master castling and en passant. When when you castle, so let's go back here. I'll just close the setup. Okay, so let's just say a normal developing position has appeared from here. Now your king can go here. So this is the only thing where a king can move to here and a rook can move to here. So let's say they play this. Okay. Castling. When you can castle your king first, he has to move two squares towards the rook. So two squares. And once the king has moved, the rook jumps over him and lands beside the king. So this is how it's done. So he just castles right now. You cannot castle if you already moved your king or involved rook. So if the king has moved up, then obviously he cannot castle anymore. So let's just say something like this. And now he cannot castle. The king does not have the opportunity to castle. See, it doesn't let you castle because the king has moved. So instead of this, what if the rook moves? Then also again the king cannot castle because the rook is blocking. So let's just say the rook moves here. He still cannot castle. Why? Because the rook has moved. And if it just moves back, that doesn't count and he can still not castle. You see, it doesn't castle. You are in check. So let's create a setup now. Okay, so let's just say you're in check here. Okay, so now you're in check, but all of your pieces are moved. So all of the pieces are moved. Okay, so here your pieces have moved, but you cannot castle. I'll show you why. Okay, so now the queen is checking and the king has to move. So the king cannot castle here because he is in check. Something has to be done. You can obviously just attack this queen after it retreats. Just castle happily. So it doesn't let me castle here, but you can actually castle because I created a custom position. It doesn't let me do that, but you can castle. Have to move your king into check while you're castling. So if you have to move your king into check while you are castling, let's just say this happens, and I'm just doing a random setup here. So wait a second. So this bishop is here. Okay. So now this cannot castle here. The king cannot castle here. Why? Because this has been being blocked. Now something has to be done. So if the queen moves, he can obviously protect this. Oops, I just killed the king. Okay. And there's a bishop here. Okay, so let's load it and see that this cannot be done now because he cannot move here. The bishop will. So if the king has just landed, the bishop will take him, and that's not legal. So that's why you cannot castle if you are in there. So again, if your pieces are in the way, that's also not let you castle. So if a piece is in the way, let's just say a knight, and now you cannot castle because your knight is in the way. Your knight should move. So now let's talk about en passant. En passant is a French word for in passing. Because although your opponent's pawn has passed a square where you would usually make a capture, you are still able to do it. So let's say black has played something like this, and then he played this. So now it's better for white. I mean, it's not better for white, but it's still the starting position. So now black has played d4. I mean d5. You can still make this capture. In en passant, you just think that it just moved here and just capture it. This is totally legal and you can do it. So now let's talk more into it. Here, white has just moved his pawn 2 steps forward and landed next to the black pawn. So let's do this for black now. Let's do set captured en passant. Remember, an en passant move has to be made on the first chance you have, or else you cannot capture anymore. Okay, so here now white plays something like knight f3. If you don't know chess notation, check the timestamp or check the other video that comes in the I button above. Okay, so now black plays something and you cannot take it. This is not legal anymore. You have to take it on the first chance you have. So that's en passant. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and if you think this video may be helpful for other players, please share it. Bye.